This week, Neal O'Farrell, the founder of the Cyber Resilience Project, will talk about cybersecurity mental health. Next up, the security news. Malware targets Ukraine. I wonder, where could that be coming from? Evil Google Docs comments. Russia grabs, is it Revel or Evil? Revel? What are we saying? What is it, Revel?
I think it's R Evil.
R Evil. We're going with R Evil. Russia grabs R Evil. Pay no attention to the Ukraine thing. We gave you R Evil. Funding a dictatorship. Zoom zero clicks when 9-year-olds launch DDoS attacks. 5G interference. And that time your mom stole your brownies. In the final segment, we air a technical segment showing you how to use WP Scan to find WordPress vulnerabilities. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Keeping up with security issues across thousands of web assets without the right approach to web application security is a daunting task. Get ahead with web vulnerability scanning automation from NetSparker, a leader in dynamic and interactive application security testing known for its ease of use and accurate results. Detect a wide range of vulnerabilities in all legacy and modern web applications, address security bugs at scale by automating the confirmation process, automatically prioritize vulnerabilities, and assign actionable tickets to the right developers in their native workflows for rapid remediation. For more information on how to scale application security with ease, visit securityweekly.com/NetSparker.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who can set your nether regions on fire without a blowtorch, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 724, recorded on January 19th, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, Mr. Larry Pesce.
Howdy.
Where'd you get that? Oh, we were talking about that in Slack.
Yeah.
Blowtorches in nether regions.
Yeah, and like I had to go back to the channel and find where I had pinned the message to, because like
I was like, wait, that sounds familiar. I don't think it's something we said. It's something we typed.
This is getting harder and harder to figure out, like to find something witty to say in the beginning of the show.
It is difficult.
Yep.
Well done, sir.
Like last week, the Kermit the Frog was a dare from my oldest daughter.
Nice.
Because when we were at Disney, she was working on like perfecting some voices and that type of stuff, and I'm like, well, I can do Kermit the Frog. She's like, you need to introduce the podcast with that.
Okay. Challenge accepted.
Hi-ho, Kermit the Frog here.
Mr. Josh Marpet is here with us. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, I was just about to say, without a blowtorch, maybe a barrel of lube would be good.
We got one of those right back. No, never mind. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Thank you. I have nothing to say about the blowtorches in nether regions, because that's something else.
It's like the rubber hose all over again, Tyler, right?
It really is. Or the bottle of lube, or your face in a jar. Like it's all starting to blend together in a nightmare.
God. Will it blend?
Quick announcement to get us started. Join us January 20th. That's tomorrow, to learn how to build your own security lab at home. Then join us February 16th to learn about validation techniques within web applications. Validating vulnerabilities within applications. Then on March 2nd, learn 5 things you can do to catch more bad guys with Doug Burks from the Security Onion. You can register for these webcasts for free at securityweekly.com/webcast. All I'm asking for is a name and email address. These 3 coming up in the new Security Weekly Unlocked webcast format are not sponsored. And if they are sponsored, it will be done differently. And I will not share your information really with anyone, especially without your permission. And I'll use your email address to send you an email and say, hey, thanks for attending. Like, here's a handout or something. So these are completely free, done in part of our new Security Weekly Unlocked series of webcasts. Just name and email address, securityweekly.com/webcasts. Neal O'Farrell is the founder of the Cyber Resilience Project with nearly 40 years of experience in cybersecurity globally. Neal is joining us tonight to talk about what we can do to raise awareness on issues of mental health for cybersecurity professionals. Neal, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, how are you? I'm already beginning to wonder what I stumbled into, but it looks like a vodka bar, so I'm kind of comfortable there.
That's right.
Perfect.
Neal, how did you get your start in information security?
Like everyone else, I went to technical college to study marketing to be a dressmaker. So,
Wow. That's an interesting journey.
That's exactly how I got my start too. It's like you were right. Everything else.
we need groups like this so we can feel comfortable talking about it, right?
How did your marketing degree help you in dressmaking?
It didn't because I didn't get it.
Oh.
So
that is like the rest of us. He's absolutely right.
No, I was going to be the third generation to take over a famous Irish weaving business with lots of fancy clients, and didn't work out. Ran away from home, ran back. Scaredy little Irish boy as I was, and the only college I could get into was the marketing college on a 2-year certificate to learn marketing, to learn branding, to sell tweed to Americans who, for some crazy reason, love polyester. I still do, apparently, judging by this show. I just first year in, someone showed me how you could steal a professor's password by sticking a floppy disk inside a drive, and all those words were just really new to me. And 2 years later, I got my first security gig selling dongles, and all sideways from there.
Oh, dongles like for licenses for software?
Yeah. Back in. So it was a startup selling accounting software, and it was expensive. It was thousands of dollars back then, and they were looking to prevent piracy. So I looked into dongles. Dongles used encryption. You all remember the data encryption standard, And 5 years after that, or 6 years after that, I won the first contract to encrypt Ireland's entire ATM network, and so I was deeply mired in encryption. Now, when I say that, Ireland's entire national ATM network, I think we probably had about 100 ATMs at the time, so it's not as audacious as it sounds, but that's how I got involved.
And that was in Ireland in the 80s and 90s?
Yeah, 80s.
No, that was 3 years ago.
It all blurs, right? It all blurs. I mean, security life was so much easier. I mean, we were. I mean, there was no email, there was no internet, there were no cell phones. Life was just, we had fun, and security people were nice too. So it was, things have changed a little bit.
Neal, when did Ireland get really super connected? Is it because I understand that it's interesting how very U.S. centric kind of view we have of many things. I've been studying how technology, security, and the internet have evolved in the U.S. When did Ireland come into the mix and get connected? Was it all around the same time?
Yeah, so we have a thing in Ireland we call the privilege of historical backwardness. I don't know if that's something that's known everywhere, but a really clever Irish guy used to use it all the time. And what we would do is we would wait until everyone had tried every possible new technology. And when we figured out the one that really worked and it was really cheap, then we moved to it. So we had analog telephones while everyone was going digital, digital switches. And then when they finally got cheap enough and got good enough, we dumped the analog and we leapfrogged everyone else because, our first new phones were best new phones. And kind of the same thing went, I think, with everything else. I mean, I haven't lived in Ireland for 25 years, but I still have family over there, and they've had 5G since forever. They can't understand why our internet speeds are so slow, and they're paying $50 a month for 1 gig speeds, and it's just it's kind of unreal. But we had the tiger economy. We kind of roared then and then collapsed a little bit. A feline distemper, I think, kind of set in, and the economy collapsed. But we're pretty advanced. But remember, it's a small island. It's about 300 miles north by 200 miles wide. It's hard to fuck things up. It's not a huge place.
That's amazing. Did you have any of the security concerns that you have now with ATMs in different ways. Whether IRA members are jacking ATMs or cyber crime before cyber was a thing. Like, what were some of the challenges in security back then as compared to what you're dealing with now?
It's almost like I planted that question. I'm just, as you could tell with the camera I used, I'm not that smart. But yeah, so one of the first gigs that I got, it was Bank of Ireland. And they called me into this hush-hush meeting at their National Computer Centre. It was close to where my parents lived. And their concern was that there were 2 streets very close to the computer centre, and their biggest worry was that if the IRA or any other terrorist organization drove a truck bomb, even outside the wall, it could take out their entire national infrastructure. So I had just started selling expert systems, recovery planning systems, and I was an agent for them, a reseller. They asked me to come in to see if it would work, because what they planned to do was take this massive computer center, this computer center back then, and build an entire replica in a bunker 15 feet below. So if they took out the top one, the bottom one was still going. And they wanted to know if my expert software would help them, make some of those planning decisions a little bit easier. Thing was, I hadn't tried it at that point because I didn't have a computer. So I had no idea how the thing actually worked. So I made the wise decision of saying, well, it's kind of, it's new and it's American, so we don't really trust it, so no. And they were so impressed by my honesty. A year later, they gave me that contract to encrypt their entire 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 ATM network. So yeah, I mean, their biggest cyber threat was some kind of an idiot in a truck with a bomb.
Neal, how did you come to be such a big proponent of and raise awareness around mental health in our field?
Well, I struggled with it for 50 years. So I'm 60 years old. So in the early teenager, I kind of saw the first signs, but it wasn't until in my late 20s they stuck a label on it and banished me to the woods. So I struggled with it for 50 years. And like a lot of people, I got 4. So,
these four mental illnesses that have been diagnosed?
Yes. So far. And when I got to 4, I stopped looking, honestly. I'm sure there's a few more in there, but yeah, I don't want any more. There's enough voices. So I got those. Were truly messed up my life, but I didn't know what they were, so I just thought I was weird, and I think other people thought I was weird, and especially you come home to your mother from studying marketing in college, and you say, Mom, I finally found what I want to do in life, and I want to be in computer security. And she kind of goes, that's great news, son number 9. What's a computer? So I think between my mental malaises and with the illnesses I'm dealing with, I think people thought I was very, very weird. And so because I was working in the intelligence community as well, going up against the NSA and GCHQ and all that kind of stuff during the crypto wars. So I was dealing with chronic stress since kind of my late 30s, trying to make sure that no one ever found out about these. I wouldn't give away any clue at a meeting. I wouldn't go to doctors in case there were records. I knew I had something, but I didn't want to know exactly what, because if I knew, they'd know. So yeah, I just, 30 years of chronic stress, just turning my life upside down. A close call with suicide a couple of years ago. I mean, we talked about it earlier, Paul, sitting on the side of a bed with a loaded gun, and I was this close. And I pulled myself back from that brink, and I said, I got to do something about it. Medications and therapy, maybe, but first I got to figure out what the problem is, what's broken. And that started me on this incredible journey of figuring out or realizing that I could get a grip on so much of this myself without therapy or medications. And then I became almost like an evangelist with no audience. I thought everyone's got to know this. And so one of kind of the epiphanies that I had in my journey through mental health, where I created this DAM system for kind of determining what was wrong with me and how I could fix it, was the decision to leave security. 40 years was enough. It's now full of people like you. I thought, I used to have the best beard in security by far, admired throughout the industry. Now, Nothing. It's like a 14-year-old. So I just thought, if I'm going to leave security, let me do something for security before I leave. And that's when the idea of the Cyber Resilience Project came up, where we not only tried to address mental illness and chronic stress in the security community, but actually turned it into a security strategy. If organizations, workplaces, employers have better minds working for them, everyone wins.
It seems to me that, like, way back in history, when you were in grade school, for example, I remember listening to Our Thing with Sammy the Bull Gravano, and he's like, I was dyslexic. He's like, but it wasn't diagnosed back then. He's like, basically just called me stupid, right? And I mean, that weighs on your mental health as well. And I feel like we've made progress in that area, but something you said really strikes me, Neal, and that is, you said in your own experience, I didn't want anyone to know that I struggle with any type of mental health or mental illness. You think that's I still think that's true today.
Absolutely. We pay lip service to it, and especially Stigma. It's great for corporate retreats, and it's great for feeble attempts at branding and culture to talk about how much you embrace the diversity of minds, but we don't. I've had people, since I started coming out and talking about mental illness, I'm going full frontal, giving them everything, showing them the whole goods. I'm getting an awful lot of, not I'm there too, and I came out, years ago, but you're so brave because, this is not going to be received well. And no one has come out quite straight and said, well, you're finished, you're done. But I get a sense with a lot of clients, it's a little bit uncomfortable around me, a little bit uncomfortable talking to me, don't want me to go there. So yeah, we haven't figured out yet how to talk about our most precious organ, the thing that drives everything, the thing that drives all of mankind, the thing that's responsible for all the good and evil in the world. We still don't want to talk about it. It's only 3 pounds of fat. What are we scared of?
So do you think a lot of that is reliant on the enterprises and the organizations? Because, I mean, you're right. You think about security clearances alone, and bringing up something like mental illness can get you cut from some very high level security stuff. Or with inside of an organization, like if you have a lot of duties, managerial and or responsibilities, like that can also get you released or relieved. So do you think this is kind of like diversity in the workplace, where that lip service is fed, they're building strategies around that for good PR, but we're not even close from the standpoint of mental health to address that? We're still doing equality and the diversity piece. How do we get to that point as an organization and even as security practitioners, kind of trying to get this promoted out there and more awareness, in those organizations that are probably not as open to it?
I wish I had a smart answer for that. That's a question everyone's wrestling with. How do we make these conversations normal and comfortable and motivational? How do we get people being absolutely comfortable telling the whole world that they are struggling with these diseases, that they are wrestling with demons every day? And I don't know how. I don't know if it's bad leadership. I don't know if we're not making enough noise about it. I know in security it's about bad leadership. We don't have many good leaders in security. We've got lots of great people in security, but a lot of them don't want to be leaders. I know so many great people in security, and I'll say, you should be a CISO by now. And even just as a term, but you should be the leader of a security team. And they said, no, I don't want it. It's not me. It's too close to C-suite. I'm not a suit kind of guy. I'm not interested in budgets or planning, whatever the reasons are. But I think because of that, we have a lot of great security people and the dearth of security leaders. And you need leadership to take on really, really challenging, probably the most challenging issue that we all have, that every organization, every individual faces. What's going on in this 3 pounds of fat? It's not hard to understand. Neuroscience has made leaps and bounds. Very easy to understand how to get this fixed and get it right, but we won't talk about it. We just won't talk about it. I mean, these conversations are still rare.
Is that? I think it's that component of leadership. Sorry, Josh. The component of leadership, right? That is that empathy, and there's a big difference between a good manager that can get results and a leader who has empathy and can really drive and motivate people and actually cares about people. Is that one of the major differences in your mind, Neal, and why you call out leadership?
I don't know if it's even empathy. I mean, they don't want to go there. A lot of the reason is they don't know how to go there.
Yeah.
They don't know what the problems are. They don't know what mental illness is. They don't know how to talk to people about it. Hey team, hands up here who's crazy. Hands up here who's got is suffering with depression or PTSD or bipolar or whatever, anxiety. It's they don't have the tools and the skills to start those conversations. They don't seem to want to learn them. Maybe it's just they're so busy doing so many other things. And I think it maybe it's just the time that we're in the human race. We're not quite ready to focus on this, critical infrastructure. We're not quite there yet. We even when we're not talking about mental illness, we're rarely talking about the brain. We rarely talk about brain health. We rarely talk about, cognitive function, about all the things that we can do and think and eat that make this thing function better, that make us happier, make us more committed and motivated and kinder and grateful. We don't talk about those either. So it's not just a fear of mental illness and going down dark passages with strange people. It's we just do not want to talk about the brain at all. And I still haven't figured out what that is, why that is.
It's somewhat of a generational thing too. Like I feel, I don't want to call it boomers, but like the people that I can recall in my experience that have phrased it this way have been from that generation. And they'll say like, if I say, well, I've got a friend or whatever, and like they're really depressed, or my other friend, they suffer from anxiety, and they'll say in every situation, like the narrative is pretty much the same. They'll say, oh, everyone's depressed, everyone's anxious and has anxiety. Like, just get over it.
Suck it up.
Yeah, suck it up. Like, get over it. Like, I think that's a generation thing, right?
Yeah. And you're weak-minded. You're weak-minded. And this is a...
Go ahead, Neal.
Sorry.
And I think to be fair, 30 years ago, we really didn't know that much about how the brain works. We didn't know what caused it. We didn't know about chemical imbalances. We didn't know much about serotonin and dopamine and things like that. We didn't know much about neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. We know so much more now. We know how it works. We know why it's broken. Generally, there are lots of things we still don't know. I say we. I mean, the broader population. I'm not a neuroscientist. Or I haven't played one on TV either, but I'm hoping to get some gigs out of this maybe.
I mean, you got to get the beard back.
I know not a chance. Unless I go to Just for Men or something like that.
And now from our neuroscience correspondent, Dr. Neal.
Hey, Security Weekly, Crazy Weekly. And I don't mind calling myself crazy, by the way. I use a term in a lot of things that I do called banjacks. It's a gentle Irish term for broken. And I don't mind admitting that I'm a little banjacks in some ways and a lot banjacks in other ways. But I think now we know so much about how the brain works, and we know there are so many things we can do to help ourselves. We know that it's not our fault that they happened, but it is our fault if we don't do anything about it. And like I said earlier, doing something about it does not necessarily mean pharmaceuticals and therapists.
Yeah.
There are so many things, that I've been trying that as a cynical old Irishman, if we had this conversation 5 years ago, I would have, we wouldn't be drinking buddies anymore. You call me crazy and you're talking about mindfulness. No, I don't think so. But now, I breathe. I know how to breathe. Wonderful. I've been doing it since I was a baby, 25,000 a day. And only now have I figured out how to do it right. And suddenly I don't have stress in my life.
Mm.
So Neal, one of the things that you said really sort of hit me. As someone that has hired staff and some of them who have had some issues with anxiety and agoraphobia and a whole bunch of other stuff. There's you mentioned that as leaders we don't want to talk about it, and I think one of the things that at least here in the U.S. that we have to be careful of as someone that is working with staff and so forth, that it's that I loved you're sitting in a meeting and you say, all right, put your hands up if you're crazy, put your hand up if you're depressed. Like, we can't ask those questions. HIPAA. HIPAA, and if I were to ask those questions, I'd have human resources down my throat so fast, and I'd be finding myself in the unemployment line. the problem that I've got is that I'd love to know those things, and I'd love to have folks be willing to volunteer those things so that I can learn about it, so I can be more effective in helping, do what we need to do and understand all of the components that go into all of those people about it. That I think the big problem is that I can't ask that question of the staff.
No.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think one approach. You're absolutely right. It's something that you can't just you can't force them to reveal, and you can't pressure them to do it. But if you create a situation where you speak in the way that they feel, or they speak in the way that we feel. So I think if you start conversations in the workplace that don't sound like they come from a how-to manual for managers, but that are spoken by people who understand what it's like to be inside the brain of someone who's mentally ill, the nuances of it. I think you're going to make a lot more of those people feel far more comfortable in talking about it, in revealing, in exchanging. And when one does, two will, three will. I think that's how we break the dam.
Beautiful.
But you have to talk about and bring in discussions of mental health into the workplace in a language that those who are struggling understand. It can't be patronizing, it can't be clinical, and it has to recognize that, like I said to Paul earlier, it's like a fingerprint. Everyone has a different version of a mental illness. It hits everyone in different ways.
Sure.
And recognizing those subtleties and nuances, I think, will make people confident that, okay, you really do get me. You really do get what it's like to be me. Maybe I am now a little bit more comfortable to talk about it, at least first in private, and then see where that goes.
Josh, sorry, you were trying to ask a question earlier.
Several times.
I've actually, yeah, well, that's okay. It's what are you going to do? Loudmouths around here, man. So I've got a couple of things to say. And first off, congrats and bravo for being so open and for working on a topic that is so stigmatized and so delicate, shall we say? I wonder, you mentioned about InfoSec people. It's not solely us. There's a friend of mine, Derek Harp. His wife Trisha Harp is a therapist, and she's been collecting data on the mental health and families of entrepreneurs for a long time. And effectively, like, some of the conclusions are pretty ugly, and it rang very true and very similar to InfoSec people as well. And I think you'd get a kick out of talking with her. It's difficult when you have people that are so driven that it becomes their entire world to understand how their mental health is so locked into that, if you will, and becomes, when your work becomes who you are, your mental health is shaken, especially when you start burning out on a regular basis and are in jobs that have you in windowless rooms working in front of a computer screen for 10 or 15 hours a day. And then you have a pandemic where mental health issues triple in a year. And then you're locked in to your computer screen.
Go the other way.
What's that?
Resources go the other way.
Oh, yeah. And salaries have been coming down for pen testers in certain circumstances and for InfoSec people. And it's difficult. I'm also curious. Do you know Amanda Berlin?
Yes, mental health hackers, right?
Yeah. I just hit her up on Twitter and said, "Tune in, you want to watch this," because I didn't know if you knew each other. So,
and it's right. Yeah, we know of each other. We've exchanged emails and talked a bit. I've never met her or talked much to her, but she's an example of where we don't want to be, because they are doing so much work to bring this out into the open, and from what I can tell, they're not getting a lot of support. I mean, you need a lot. Basically, they're marketing a brand, mental health and security, and that takes a lot of money, a lot of people to support it. And I'm not sure they're getting much real support from the heavy hitters, the CISOs, the people with funding, the HR people, whatever it is. But she's still pushing. She and her crew are pushing hard.
So tell me how you're different. Forgive me. Let me ask that question.
How am I different?
Yeah. What's the difference between the two organizations? I'm curious.
She's an organization and I'm not.
That's a good one. Okay.
She has a group of people. I'm just me. I'm just I mean, they have a number of different programs. They work around a lot of the conferences. They network far better than I do. I've lost touch with a lot of people in security, and I kind of float in and out of it. You know, I tried to get out of security, got dragged back in. Some clients in California. Now I'm back in mental health again. I think our messages are all the same. I think mine is slightly different now in that it's all I do, except for those clients. But it's really all I do, and it's trying to use myself as a guinea pig, try all these things that I'm learning, seeing what the results are and sharing those, and then just evangelizing the hell out of people that there are so many things that you can do to take care of your own mind that involve a lot of fluffy words that we don't like saying, things like gratitude and happiness and kindness. It's amazing how they can fully and permanently rewire your brain so this shit doesn't stink so much.
Neal,
So
I think
hope that answered your question, Senator.
I think there's probably some people listening that are like, what do you mean by mental illness? I think a lot of us think of mental illness as like the extreme is, like padded cell. But I think you're using the term in a more general sense. So what are some examples that may help people go, yeah, you know what? Maybe I do need to think about that more and think about like a treatment plan for myself, because I didn't really realize it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that you learn. And again, going back to your 3 pounds of mush, 3 pounds of fat water and sheer bloody magic stuck between your ears. Learn what's going on up there. It is everything that you are. It is important to learn the difference, what mental illness is, the difference between anxiety and just being anxious, the difference between bummed and being, major depressive disorder or bipolar depression. It really is important to understand, because you either might ignore it, which is not good, or you might misdiagnose it, which is equally not good, or you may think, I was going to repeat myself, you may think it's one thing and it's actually something else. It really is important to, if you're seeing signs in your behavior, and for me, it's my way of thinking more than acting. I didn't act, I didn't behave. I was wound up like a coil. No one could read me. All the chaos was in here. And it's only when I started to write down what it's like to be in my head. And it's amazing when you put things on paper. And, I'm this, this is how I feel about this is how I feel about myself. I have all these crazy thoughts since I was a teenager, and I wrote them down and finally began to self-diagnose. So it looks like I got this, and this. And then at least I had the good senses to decide self-diagnosis is not the best thing. And I started sharing them with doctors, and they say, oh yeah, okay, we can confirm you have this. There's no blood test for depression. There's no DNA test for schizophrenia. So you have to kind of diagnose yourself first, which, requires you to think deeply, take some time to think about why you think the way that you do. And this was probably the most important lesson that I got out when I started pulling this thread and started practicing these things. The idea of metacognition. Zuckerberg will explain it in more detail later in the PowerPoint. But metacognition is just thinking more about the way that you think. Thinking about why you think certain ways, why you process thoughts like stress in different ways. And when you start pulling on that thread, it reveals all things about your views of the world, your values, your self-imposed stressors. So this idea of metacognition is really an important first step towards figuring out, do you just think in different ways, or is there something wrong with your wiring that you really should address? Yeah,
it's interesting. And a lot of that stuff can go mislabeled, I'll call it, through a significant portion of your life, right? Like it was the example, we'll share something about me. Like I was labeled a procrastinator. I always thought like, well, that's a negative thing. Like I don't want to be a procrastinator, right? But it turns out that's probably.
But did you do something about it?
Yeah, and I put off doing something about it for all those years.
And say that
I'm a procrastinator. But it turns out that could be ADD. That could be, a number of different things that you've just been kind of mislabeled. Back to my example, Sammy the Bull. Like they called him stupid, and it turns out he was like severely dyslexic.
Right. Yeah, I was always told as a kid I was shy. And I couldn't understand it because inside I wasn't. Inside I was fearless.
Right.
I wasn't afraid of anything. But I couldn't be around people. I had this physical reaction to being around people. And I eventually diagnosed with severe social anxiety with avoidant personality. And as soon as it was described to me, it was almost like someone had just written the book of my life. Because everything I've done in my life reflects that diagnosis, matches it. I hide away from people. I've never had a job because I couldn't work in a workplace. I couldn't be around people. So I always had to be an entrepreneur, which goes back to what you talked about earlier. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with social anxiety. So they become entrepreneurs because the other option is not available.
Right.
They can't get a job. They can't be around people. They can't take orders from people. They can't network. They can't go to conferences. They can't glad hand because they are so tightly wrapped up in this internal anxiety about the way people perceive them. Going it alone is their only option. They're kind of forced to be an entrepreneur, which is kind of how I ended up. So yeah, it's mislabeling, not labeling at all. It's complex. And that's why it's so hard to address. You don't know where to start. I keep talking about pulling this thread. It's a long thread. Where do you start pulling it? How do you even spot that it's a thread? You really have to got to be very brutally honest with yourself.
I think one of the big places that we do have the opportunity to make a difference and make some headway is really starting, with ourselves, yes, and learning some of these traits and things to look for and how to better ourselves, but really training the next generation and our kids to be open to talk about things that we struggle with, to get them to understand the difference between raw emotion and the reaction to those emotions, their ability to control and reframe and utilize their mental capabilities. Like all of these things are, if taught at home and trained early, like we can begin to make an effect in very small ways, but that can trickle down. A lot of what we're seeing is kind of that boomer generation of, suck it up, be tough, don't talk about emotion, deal with it, go to work, do the thing, and not talking about that. So the next generation of kids that, are either us or our parents have done kind of the same thing because that's trained behavior. So we can't really break that cycle or expect corporations and enterprises to solve this problem if we're not able to solve some of this at home and be good examples.
Yeah, you bring up a really, really good point there. And I've started working on this initiative just on the last couple of weeks. It's just an idea right now, but I've done a lot of work in schools with kids on cybersecurity, going back about even 10 years ago. But I thought about this idea. You're absolutely right. We need to start talking about mental health and the brain and brain health to kids in high school, at least, at the latest. But it's like the workplace. Besides the fact it's juvenile and a little bit toxic, high schools and school kids are uncomfortable talking about mental illness. They don't know what it is. They don't know how to explain it because you're talking about feelings and they haven't fully developed their ability to describe and express their feelings. And it's awkward. And, everyone knows the kids who have ADD and ADHD and autism and stuff like that. They just don't know their way around them. So I have this theory. Neuroscientists tell us that the most successful people in the world are the happiest people. They're not happy because they're successful because they're happy. Lots of great studies from the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley, from the Gratitude Project, I think in UCLA has done a lot of work on it, that happier people are the most successful in life. They have the most friends, they have the most self-confidence, they make more money, they have better jobs, they get better promotion, okay? So if scientists are right about that, 15, 16-year-old, if you want to be successful in anything that you do and touch, if you want to be popular, if you want to be admired and respected, if you want to have the best possible life, you just have to be happy. All the other crap doesn't matter. So pull that thread. You see, I talk like a seamstress. That's my weaving background. I'm always talking about threads. But anyway, pull that. Yank that chain. So scientists have also seemed to have concluded, well, what's the best path to happiness? They think it's kindness. So that's a way to start a conversation with school kids, that a message that they will get. We're not going to talk about dark subjects like depression or anxiety or bullying and any of these things. We're going to talk about what probably matters most to you in life: being popular, being successful, being admired, being liked, being part of a group. You can kindness your way there. And so so I started testing this in some people. I say, well, okay, that's great. That sounds great. What is the first thing I need to do? What's my path to being kind? It's such a massive word. It starts very simply. Stop doing unkind things. So if you started that conversation in high schools, I think it could be a very, very relatable way to introduce discussions about the brain, about mental and brain health, because this all happens in the brain. A lot of unkindness happens because of broken brain. You're dealing with your own stuff, so you don't know how to deal with others. You're angry all the time because things are broken in your head and you're screaming and no one gets it. No one gets why you're weird or odd, or you got sweaty hands or can't make a conversation, or you're not good at sports, or you have low self-esteem, whatever it is. Something is going on in your head and you can't put words to it. But if we could start the discussion in a language and on the topic that most teams will absolutely embrace, kindness, happiness, and success in everything in life, when you're in school and when you leave, I think that might be a very powerful way to introduce those incredibly important discussions. Well, all this is happening up here, and it's directly connected to mental wellness and unwellness.
Neal, can you go back in time 35 years and go have a chat with 12-year-old Larry, please? Because he'd really like to hear that.
Was there ever?
Are you that young, you bastard?
Yes.
No, his math is off.
No, it's not. It's not. I'm 47.
Nice try. Pressure. I get it. But yeah, so imagine if we introduced that concept to high school kids. Not just, think of all the collateral benefits. Not just introducing mental wellness and mental health at a very early age when they're comfortable talking about it because they have a comfortable language, but creating maybe the first generation of kind people, which in turn will create the first generation of genuinely happy people. And happy people is not just people who do happy things or things that make them happy, but they are happy in their core. They are happy in their being and their self. Imagine how that would change the world. It's a lovely idea to think about it, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Because look at me. I was a deeply unhappy, deeply cynical old Irishman. And I've reached a level of a degree of calm and zen and tolerance that I've never experienced before. I grew up in the intelligence community, and that makes you very cynical. When I was in my 20s, I was dealing with car bomb threats. My phone was being tapped. I had kept a shotgun by my bed. This is my 20s. That kind of, and when you're dealing with mental illness, that kind of breaks you a little. But learning these tools and tricks just flip that absolutely, completely. I'll give you a story.
Please.
I'm Irish. I have to. The very first time I tried mindfulness a few years ago, I never tried it before, completely cynical about it. I was going to try it for 10 minutes, as they told me to try it for at least 10. I spent the first 3 years struggling with this wind tunnel of ideas, which you tend to, ADD. I had a million things that I had to do. I got to 8 minutes. So essentially I got 5 minutes of mindfulness, mindful breathing. Very first time. I floated out of that room with the most euphoric sense of peace and calm that I have ever felt. My wife came around the corner and she kind of looked at me, and I just floated towards her with this grin on my face. And she'd be like, what in the holy prefrontal cortex is wrong with you? And it's almost as though at that moment, she figured out just a moment too late that she'd actually married a serial killer, because I had that kind of incredible sociopathic grin on my face. So 5 minutes of mindfulness flipped the switch for me. And it taught me this is all that easy. And it didn't cure my depression. It didn't cure my anxiety. I struggled from suicidal ideation, have for probably 20 years. Think about, I have suicide is my happy place. Everyone needs a little suicide room, or was it The Simpsons, a crying room. But it didn't cure it, but it calmed it. It took the edge off everything, because it took the edge off stress. It made me calmer. It gave me more perspective, made me more grateful. So all these things just from my 5 minutes of mindfulness and breathing, if we could get those ideas into everyone's heads and hands, especially in cybersecurity, but especially amongst teens. I see efforts in high schools now, but it annoys me because there's a mindfulness class this term. That's not going to do it. That might turn them off mindfulness forever if your gym instructor is the one who's doing it. It's just no.
Yeah, it's interesting how mental health is like maintaining any other kind of health, whether it's the health of your network, the health of your security program. It's about diligence and developing good habits, and it's not something that you do once and then I'll get back to that in the next couple of months or whatever. Like,
you got to bake it in from the beginning.
Yeah, very much like security, right? Like hygiene. We use the word hygiene all the time.
You can fix it. I mean, there's an entire country that tried, Bhutan, isn't it? That has an index of happiness.
Place in the world.
Yeah. And they actually measure life by how happy they are. And
they are struggling, though. They are struggling a little bit. I haven't. They're struggling economically because of happiness.
Interesting.
Okay, and then there's laughing clubs in India.
Yeah.
I studied some of this.
All the little therapies and tricks that are out there. I mean, you can give your brain a shot of dopamine just by faking a smile, because the brain detects the facial muscles responsible for smiling, moving into the smiling position. It thinks you're happy, gives you a shot of dopamine. It's quite incredible how you can manipulate your brain into giving you what you need. Not necessarily what you want. Hopefully, you do want to be happy. But there's an encyclopedia full of tricks that you can and you talked about earlier. I mean, your brain is hardware and software. I mean, the brain's the hardware and the software is the mind. One runs on the other. You have to maintain both. You have to constantly patch and update both, and they will serve you well for hopefully forever.
And exercise, I think, and we've talked about this before when we're discussing this subject, but exercise is important. Even just going for a walk, right?
Yeah.
But a run is better. In your opinion, a run is better.
Well, so again, neuroscience has revealed incredible things about it. Going for a walk in the sunshine with music, friends, and pets. One of the best things that you can do for your mental health. You're out, you're getting exercise, you're out in fresh air, you're out in sunshine. The body loves oxygen, vitamin D, nitric oxide. The brain loves them. They're incredibly important for the brain to keep the brain fueled, to reduce inflammation, which is brain death. Pets and friends release oxytocin. Music releases serotonin and sometimes dopamine. So simply by those actions, you're releasing all four of the major dose hormones: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, just by those. And that's what the brain needs to be happy. But neuroscientists seem to believe that running is turning out to be the best thing for brain health rather than mental health. They think it can tap down the development of proteins that can lead to early cognitive decline, especially dementia and Alzheimer's, which I fret about, because if you've had a life of
just
depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
What? I didn't get it.
Forget it about Alzheimer's.
No, but I also, Neal, like, as usual, my wife is right. Because I told her the other day, I'm like, hey, those like wireless headphones, like I was thinking of pairing those with my phone. Like, do you still have them? She's like, yeah, why? I'm like, I was thinking about trying to work in my routine, going for a walk. And like, I really want to use headphones when I do that. And she's like, oh, we should sign up for a half marathon. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Hold on. I said I wanted to go for a walk, all right? I didn't say I wanted to go run no damn half marathon like that.
Catch the 5K. Come on, let's go.
She's like, yeah, but we have to set a goal for ourselves. When we don't set a goal, I'm like, can we start out with just walking?
Yeah. Can I set the goal? I'm going to go for a walk every day this week.
Yes.
Well, but it does work. There's a thing that neuroscientists have kind of focused in the last couple of years called neurogenesis. And it's the ability of the brain, they never knew it before, to build more of itself. Through neuroplasticity, it can spark new connections, which can help the brain be stronger and healthy and make you smarter, improve memory, that kind of stuff. But neurogenesis actually makes the brain go more of itself, which is critically important, because as you grow, you lose brain cells. So you actually could end up, if you do the right thing, having a bigger brain when you die than any other time in your life. But they think the only thing that they're pretty sure of so far that triggers neurogenesis is intense aerobic exercise and particularly running. And it also, I mean,
wait, how far do you have to run? How far do you have to run, Neal? Though
A half a marathon, Paul.
like a half marathon's a long.
How much of your brain is missing? How much do you need to make up?
You're going to need to do the full marathon.
I think I need to go for a full
You
marathon.
need to do, like, they have ultra marathons, Paul.
Yeah.
They have ultra marathons, okay? 100 miles or more. Go for it, man.
Ironman training. We need to do the Ironman, right? Triathlete. Yeah.
But think of all the other things. I mean, maybe you're losing weight. You're feeling healthier. You feel fitter. You feel strong. You feel more vital. That's triggering all the happy hormones, the dose hormones again. So if you look at all the things that the brain and the mind, all the things that the brain and the mind need to be ticking over at their absolute optimum, they're all in little things. The way that you think, the way that you exercise, the food that you eat, the company that you keep. The more you know about these triggers, obviously the easier it is to trigger them, to do those things and to think those things and to eat those things that the mind and the brain love. And it's a wonderful place to be. I mean, I'm still here, which is a wonderful place to be.
Well, we're glad you're here, Neal. And you created some resources rather, based on your research and passion for this topic. So where can people find that, and what do you have there for folks?
Yeah, so I started building this video course called Get a Grip. And it really is, it's based around what we've talking about, that the more you know about what's happening in your brain and your mind, the easier it is to get a grip on it, to take control over it, to manage it better. So right now it's a collection of 12 videos. It's about 75 minutes in total. And it walks through everything we've talked about. How those hormones, neurotransmitters work in your brain, how learning, thinking, gratitude, happiness rewire your brain, the types of exercise, the type of food that you need to eat, and not just about weight. And the fact it doesn't talk about weight at all or diet. It talks about how you reduce inflammation in the brain, how to practice mindfulness, how breathing changes the brain. So it's 12 episodes. It's about 75 minutes. But then what I did was I created 3 additional episodes that talks purely about cyber resilience. What is it about the security world, the security of life that makes us stressed, and how we can tackle that stress? And then it leads you into, well, here are all the other things that you can do. So you can find it at justgetagrip.co. So I'm going to change that. I might change it to .net or something, but that was the easiest domain I could find, justgetagrip.co. The lessons are there. They're between 5 and 10 minutes each. They can be taken independently of each other. It's not a beginning and an ending course. Jump in on any subject that you want. And it's a mixture of everything I learned from neuroscience. It was what I found when I looked behind the science. Who's behind the science? What are the studies? How comprehensive are the studies? How long have they been going back? And then in a lot of cases, what happened when I tried it? When I started exercising again, when I started practicing gratitude, mindfulness, meditation, breathing, how it really just I became there's a word I love called palingenesis, a rebirth. I found myself reborn, not in a religious way, but certainly in an emotional way a few years ago, and I learned how to get a grip.
Awesome. Thank you so much for putting that together, Neal.
And Neal, are you the narrator of said videos for those of us who can't get enough of your Irish brogue?
Mm.
I am.
Awesome.
And it's in this very studio here in Wyoming, Ohio, which is very confusing to most people.
That is confusing. Neal, I just have 5 questions left for you. You ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Go ahead. Shoot me down.
3 words to describe yourself.
Banjaxed, but happier.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Knife. Always. I carried knives since I was 12 years old. 3 of them, all the time. Knives, don't know why.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
I did. It's coming out soon. I should have plugged it. Damn.
You should. Absolutely.
Now's your chance. What's it called?
Now was a perfect opportunity to plug it.
It's called Banjaxed. Imagine, but it's in code. It's a shout out to my past life, but it's BNJXD. It's not available anywhere, so don't bother looking. But I'm hoping to get it out in the next couple of months. It's a story. It's a story of My Life in the Crypto Wars as a dress designer.
That's awesome. What is your favorite hacker movie?
Oh, favorite hacker movie. Oh, gee. I hate questions like that because I have to say something real cool or you'll figure out I'm a fraud. I honestly don't. I can't think of anyone. And I know people have been asked these questions before, and I said I really ought to remember that because that's really cool. What was that TV series with Rami, whatever his name is?
Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot. I love Mr. Robot.
It's a good one.
I loved it because it really did sound like he was Banjax too. It really was me, except he was good at what he did.
It's interesting how it tells the story of mental health and illness.
It's voices, it's hallucinations, it's delusions, and trying to a mission for the greater good, a purpose-filled life, and going up against these awful dark enemies and using real skills that are genuine. They do exist. I found it resonated. I got bored towards the end because I found it was a little bit repetitive and typical, writers run out of ideas. So thank you for, may I just say Mr. Robot's my favorite?
Yes. Yeah. You got it.
Works.
Choose two celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Leonard Cohen.
Ooh.
I love Leonard Cohen. Songs of Love and Hate. I stole that from my sister as soon as she bought it. Who else? So it's got to be a woman, right?
No.
Doesn't have to be a woman.
Nope.
No.
Could be a robot.
Who do I want?
Could be a man, robot, alien.
Well, okay. Lou Reed.
Yeah. All right.
Lou Reed and Leonard Cohen. But it just shows how odd I was as a teenager. But that would be in the early 70s. I love their music. So I was only 13 or 14. I couldn't get enough of Death of a Ladies' Man, Songs of Love and Hate. And
Brilliant. Outstanding.
Brilliant.
Neal, thank you so much.
What you're telling me is my fantasy parents are dead.
That's okay. The rule is alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise, which I still don't quite understand what that means. But I think that means we're trying to say anyone.
Yeah, anyone.
Alive or dead.
Now I wish
fictional,
I had a crying room.
Yeah.
Fictional or real, fictional or imaginary.
That's it.
Fictional or somebody you made up. Yeah.
Neal, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing it. And let's do it again if you can stand me. Let's
absolutely.
Start a movement here.
And we want to have you back. Absolutely.
You're awesome, dude.
Coming up next to the security news. Stick around.